If you ride a Harley built in the last few years, this could be the most important video you watch all year. A serious defect has triggered a massive recall, and thousands of riders are still unaware. Stick around to find out if your bike is on the list and what to do next. What's happening? Harley-Davidson just issued a recall that could shake the core of its most loyal riders. Over 82,000 motorcycles, real steel on the road, are now officially at risk. And the threat isn't some abstract software glitch or optional safety update. This one is physical, mechanical, and deadly. Buried beneath the seat of some of Harley's most iconic Softail models is a small failure with the potential to end lives. The issue lies in a critical part of the rear suspension system. If the rear suspension adjuster mounting bracket breaks, it can cause the adjuster knob to drop down and rub against the rear tire. Over time, this contact can carve a deep groove into the rubber. That groove leads to loss of pressure, and the moment a tire begins to bleed air at highway speed, a rider's control of the bike vanishes in an instant. A machine built for freedom can become a machine of chaos. The very platform that promised reliability and smooth power delivery could now be hiding a silent hazard that most owners would never notice until the damage is done. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and Harley-Davidson confirmed the recall is limited to the United States for now, but the numbers are staggering. From model year 2018 all the way through to 2024, affected Softail models include the FLDE Deluxe, the FLHC Heritage Classic, the FLHCS Anniversary Editions, the FXLRS Lowrider S, the FXLRST Lowrider ST, and the FXRST. If you own one of these machines, the risk is real, and the danger may already be growing with every mile. And the terrifying part? You won't know anything's wrong until it's too late. We've done the research to bring you the facts that matter. If you own one of these bikes, it's critical you act now. Drop a comment below to let us know your experience and make sure to hit the like button. The warnings Harley ignored. Long before this recall ever reached headlines, Harley riders were already talking. On forums, in service bays, and at dealership counters, the same complaints surfaced again and again. Some reported strange sounds under the seat. Others noticed unexpected tire wear. A few mechanics even warned of premature tread damage during regular inspections. But somehow those warnings didn't translate into urgent corporate action. They were treated as isolated issues, annoyances, not alarms. Riders who tried to escalate their concerns were often told it was normal or unrelated. One rider mentioned hearing a scraping sound while cornering but was assured it was a saddlebag clip. Another noticed a sudden dip in tire pressure after only a few thousand miles but chalked it up to a bad valve stem. In hindsight, these were not random quirks. They were the earliest signs of a dangerous design flaw slowly exposing itself across thousands of bikes. Independent shops started noticing patterns. Dealers began seeing repeat visits from the same models. But without a formal investigation or widespread bulletin, there was no official path forward. Riders relied on the hope that Harley would eventually respond. But months passed, then years, and by the time the recall was announced, the damage had already reached tens of thousands of bikes across the country. And while the riders kept sounding the alarm, Harley stayed quiet. Don't trust the wrong part again. The gear we ride with, solid, dependable, is all linked in the description below. When the rear tire fails at 70, it always starts the same way. A gentle hum, a small shudder under the seat, a faint thump on the highway. Most riders wouldn't notice it until they checked the tire, but by then, the groove was already there, etched across the rubber like a scar. That's exactly what happened to James, a rider from Arizona who took his 2021 Heritage Classic out on a weekend ride. Halfway into his trip, he felt the bike drift slightly during a turn. He chalked it up to road conditions. 2 days later, his tire failed entirely at 70 miles per hour. James survived. Barely. The rear end fishtailed and forced him into the shoulder. A truck passed within inches. When the bike finally stopped, he noticed the adjuster knob was dangling from beneath the seat and the tire had been carved nearly halfway through. It wasn't a wear issue. It wasn't rider error. It was the bracket, and he had no idea it was even there. Another rider, Lisa from Ohio, took her 2023 Lowrider S in for service after hearing what she thought was a broken clamp. The tech at the dealership lifted the seat and immediately saw the problem. The mounting bracket had fractured completely, leaving the adjuster rubbing against the sidewall of the tire. Lisa was lucky. Her tire hadn't failed yet, but the groove was deep and growing. These aren't isolated horror stories. They're warnings. Riders are discovering the flaw not because of an inspection, but because because they nearly crashed, and that's where the real betrayal lies. For a company built on heritage, loyalty, and rider safety, this defect feels like more than a mechanical mistake. It feels like a broken promise, one that could have cost lives if discovered just a few miles later. But it wasn't just a mechanical failure, it was a corporate failure in the making. How a bad design made it into production. It started with something small, an overlooked bracket tucked beneath the seat of Harley-Davidson's beloved Softail lineup. But that piece of hardware, no bigger than a wallet, would become the root of a recall affecting over 82,000 motorcycles. What puzzles many riders and analysts is not just how it failed, but how it got approved in the first place. This wasn't a fluke or a manufacturing error. It was a design that passed through Harley's engineering team, supplier meetings, cost analysis reviews, and multiple rounds of production validation. And still, it made it onto the road. The story of this bracket begins years before the recall. During the Softail platform redesign, Harley was under intense pressure to modernize. Lighter frames, cleaner lines, and improved rider comfort. The goal was clear: blend the company's heritage with innovation to appeal to both loyalists and a new generation. But redesigning a platform from the ground up meant hundreds of new decisions, and not all of them were driven by performance. In this case, cost and speed mattered more. Multiple former engineers have anonymously described the cost-cutting culture that began emerging in the mid-2010s. Parts were sourced based on lowest bids. Prototyping timelines were trimmed down. The bracket in question, which holds the rear suspension adjuster, was flagged internally for being too thin. A stronger cast aluminum version was proposed, but it was heavier, slightly more expensive, and more difficult to integrate with the surrounding geometry. That version never left the CAD model. The one that did, made of stamped steel, was cheaper, lighter, and easier to weld into place. It met the bare minimum requirements on a stress test, but those tests didn't account for real-world vibration, weather corrosion, or fatigue over tens of thousands of miles. What's worse, that bracket was located under the seat, out of sight, out of mind, and rarely inspected. Once production began, there was no turning back. Units rolled off the line year after year from 2018 to 2024. And the more you follow the supply chain, the clearer the cover-up becomes. Europe's about to wake up. When the recall was announced in the United States, it was framed as a domestic safety measure. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration listed the affected VINs, published safety notices, and coordinated with American dealers. But there was something conspicuously absent from Harley's press release: any mention of global markets. That silence wasn't an oversight, it was a calculation. Harley knew that extending this recall to Europe and other regions would trigger regulatory scrutiny, international press coverage, and potentially billions more in logistical and legal costs. But here's the catch: many of the recalled models were sold globally. The FLHCS, FXLRS, and FXLRST, for example, are popular models not just in the US, but across Germany, the Netherlands, Australia, and even Japan. In fact, Harley's European dealerships have already begun fielding calls from concerned riders who saw the American recall online. And while Harley has issued no official statement for the European market, internal leaks suggest that several countries' regulators are now quietly requesting production records and safety test results. In the United Kingdom, at least 2 motorcycle safety forums are urging members to manually check their shock mounts and report unusual wear. In Germany, where product safety laws are stricter, it's expected that the Kraftfahrt-Bundesamt, the country's federal motor transport authority, will soon initiate its own inquiry. Once that happens, Harley cannot contain the issue. European recalls are tied to centralized consumer protection databases that force manufacturers to act across borders. The bigger concern for Harley is legal fragmentation. While U.S. lawsuits tend to result in class action settlements, European product liability laws are handled at the national level. That means Harley may face separate investigations, penalties, and repair programs in every country where the affected models were sold. The administrative and financial strain will be massive, because when European regulators investigate, Harley's global credibility is next. The billion-dollar blow to brand trust. You can fix a bracket. You can even even recall a bike. But rebuilding trust in a legacy brand, that's a different kind of challenge. One Harley Davidson is now facing head-on. The moment this recall went public, the stock dipped. Resale values for affected models dropped almost overnight, with dealerships reporting trade-ins being devalued by thousands of dollars. Riders began flooding forums asking whether their bikes were safe, and insurance companies, they started asking questions too. The damage isn't just mechanical, it's reputational. Harley has long cultivated an image of reliability, American craftsmanship, and road-tested performance. But when a defect as basic as a bracket, part of a platform used for over 6 years, can potentially cause a catastrophic crash. That image begins to unravel. Riders who once wore the brand like armor now feel abandoned. Even those whose bikes aren't on the recall list are questioning whether corners were cut elsewhere. Dealerships, too, are feeling the ripple. Service departments are backed up, sales staff are reporting hesitant buyers, and Harley's own franchise partners are starting to raise concerns about the brand's silence. It's one thing to face a recall, it's another to handle it with cold PR, no press conference, and minimal customer outreach. The result? A perception that Harley didn't just mess up, they tried to hide it. Analysts are now estimating that the recall, lawsuits, and global response could cost the company well over $1 billion in direct and indirect losses. That includes repairs, legal settlements, lost sales, brand devaluation, and potential penalties in foreign markets. And that figure could grow significantly if international regulators take action. But financial damage was just the beginning. Harley's foundation was starting to crack. The Softail gamble is falling apart. It was supposed to be Harley-Davidson's bold reinvention, a sleeker, lighter, more powerful line that would carry the brand into the next era. When the company unveiled the reimagined Softail platform in 2018, it declared it a turning point. Old-school Dyna fans were skeptical, but Harley stood firm. The Softail would now serve as the foundation for multiple models, merging legacy design with modern performance. Internally, it was branded as a long-term investment. But now, 7 years later, that gamble is unraveling, and fast. The rear suspension adjuster bracket recall is not just a hardware failure. It's a crack in the entire foundation of Harley's Softail platform strategy. This wasn't an isolated part on a niche model. It was used across a wide span of motorcycles built year after year. Harley's leadership bet heavily on modular efficiency, assuming one well-engineered platform could serve many bikes, reduce costs, and streamline production. What they didn't anticipate was how a single weak link could compromise the entire chain. This recall is forcing riders and dealers alike to ask a deeper question. What else was compromised in Harley's rush to consolidate? Was this bracket the only shortcut? Riders have reported discomfort with rear suspension tuning, confusing maintenance instructions, and a lack of consistency in ride quality. And now, with over 82,000 bikes recalled, the strategy once meant to future-proof the company is becoming a cautionary tale. Worse still, the recall is reigniting nostalgia for the very Dyna models Harley scrapped in favor of this shift. For many loyalists, the Softail redesign now feels like the moment the brand lost its way. And while Harley hoped this platform would unify its lineup, it's beginning to divide the community instead. And just when they needed it to succeed, Softail sales started slipping away. Dealerships are starting to revolt. In the wake of the recall announcement, it wasn't just riders asking questions. Harley-Davidson dealerships across the country were blindsided. Some found out from customers who had seen the NHTSA notice before corporate had even sent a formal communication. Others were left scrambling for parts and answers with service departments suddenly overrun. What started as confusion quickly turned to frustration and, for some, outright revolt. Dealerships form the backbone of Harley's brand presence in the real world. They host weekend meetups, sell branded gear, and offer the kind of loyalty-driven service that big-box competitors envy. But those same dealers now feel abandoned by the very company they've invested in. Managers report that they weren't trained on the defect, weren't given enough parts for immediate replacements, and received no customer communication templates from the company. Instead, they were left to explain a dangerous bracket defect to angry riders, without clarity or backup. It's not just the service bay that's under pressure. Sales floors have taken a hit too. Models affected by the recall are now seen as suspect. Trade-in values are falling. New buyers are hesitant. In some cases, dealers have paused selling certain Softails entirely until they can confirm which VINs are cleared. For a brand already struggling with showroom traffic, this setback has come at the worst possible time. And behind closed doors, dealer councils are reportedly raising concerns. Meetings with regional reps have turned tense. Some franchises are quietly considering cutting future orders. They aren't just angry about the defect, they're angry about being treated like an afterthought. And that pressure, it's igniting tension between Harley's leadership and its boots on the ground. The riders are fighting back. For years, Harley-Davidson riders have been more than customers. They've been a culture. They tattoo the logo on their bodies, ride cross-country for charity, and show up to dealerships just to drink coffee and talk bikes. But after the bracket recall, that loyalty is starting to shift into something else: defiance. Rider groups, once content with brand loyalty and annual rallies, are now organizing on a different front. Across Facebook, Reddit, and local chapters, Softail owners are sharing photos of cracked brackets, shredded tires, and handwritten letters sent to Harley corporate. A petition demanding full buybacks for affected models has already gathered over 12,000 signatures. Others are calling for independent inspections, better rider education, and an extension of warranties on any part of the Softail platform linked to safety. Club leaders are voicing their frustrations publicly, some releasing statements condemning Harley's delayed response. Influencers and mechanics on YouTube are walking viewers through the defect and urging riders to speak out. But this movement isn't just noise, it's unified. A protest ride has been announced in Wisconsin near Harley headquarters, inviting affected owners to line the streets with their recalled bikes. It's part demonstration, part demand. Treat riders like lives, not liabilities. Harley once called its riders a family, but that family now feels betrayed. And when you betray family, the consequences don't just sting, they last. But instead of fixing the damage, Harley made a cold calculation. Harley's cold PR strategy. When the news broke, Harley-Davidson didn't release a video message. There was no CEO statement, no apology tour, no reassuring speech at an industry event. Instead, there was a short, sterile paragraph buried in a recall bulletin on a government website. No emotion, no urgency, just legally required language. The recall notice cited a mounting bracket defect that could cause abnormal wear. It made no mention of the potential for catastrophic tire failure. It didn't explain how the failure feels or what riders should look for. And most importantly, it didn't sound like it came from a company that cares about the humans riding these machines. For a brand built on lifestyle, freedom, and brotherhood, the tone felt robotic, disconnected. Riders noticed. So did dealers. While brands like Toyota or Ford often hold press conferences during safety recalls, Harley's silence was deafening. There were no proactive email blasts, no FAQ pages on their website. Just a list of VINs and vague instructions to contact your dealer. That coldness is already backfiring. Riders say it feels like a cover-up. Some are accusing the company of prioritizing liability management over rider safety. And even Harley's own dealerships are struggling to defend the lack of communication. Public relations experts have called it a textbook case of brand damage by omission. The longer Harley stays silent, the louder the community gets. And in the age of social media, corporate silence doesn't protect a brand, it isolates it. And while Harley stayed silent, every competitor was already taking advantage. Indian, Honda, and Yamaha smell blood. It didn't take long. Within days of Harley-Davidson's recall making headlines, competing motorcycle brands began adjusting their marketing strategies. Indian Motorcycle, Harley's most direct American rival, quietly sent internal memos to dealerships instructing them to prepare limited-time trade-in bonuses specifically for Harley owners. Within a week, Indian's official social media feeds lit up with targeted ads. Tired of waiting? Ride with confidence. Ride Indian. The message was clear. Harley riders were vulnerable, and the competition was ready to catch them. Honda and Yamaha followed quickly, but with different tactics. Instead of attacking Harley outright, they leaned into reliability messaging. Honda's touring and cruiser division launched a national campaign emphasizing engineering consistency and long-term value. Meanwhile, Yamaha began pushing its Star Series with a renewed emphasis on low maintenance and service satisfaction scores. These weren't just marketing shifts, they were strategic strikes. Harley's recall hadn't just shaken riders' confidence, it had opened a window for competitors to fracture a fiercely loyal customer base. Even European brands got in on the opportunity. Triumph and BMW dealerships started highlighting their warranty programs and rider support packages. For riders who had long flirted with foreign options but stayed loyal to American-made iron, the recall was the final nudge. And it worked. Dealerships in multiple states reported former Harley owners walking in and trading their bikes for something new, something they trusted. The brand that once symbolized defiance now looked like a risk. And the moment that trust wavered, every competitor moved in with precision. But what came next didn't just hurt Harley, it reached Capitol Hill. The political pressure mounts. It began with a single letter. A bipartisan group of senators, citing the growing recall numbers and potential danger to motorcyclists, sent an official inquiry to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. They demanded a full accounting of Harley-Davidson's internal knowledge timeline and questioned why the defect had gone unnoticed through 6 separate model years. Within 72 hours, the story was picked up by national media, and Harley found itself at the center of an entirely new kind of storm. Transportation safety has long been a regulatory concern, but it rarely garners headlines unless the numbers are massive or the brand is iconic. In this case, both were true. Over 82,000 bikes, one of the most famous American manufacturers. And now, political figures were asking, how did this happen? And who looked the other way? Behind the scenes, regulators began coordinating. The Department of Transportation requested technical records. NHTSA officials were called into closed-door briefings. Rumors swirled that committee hearings were being considered, an uncomfortable prospect for Harley executives who now face the possibility of being subpoenaed to testify. It didn't stop at vehicle safety. Some lawmakers began using the recall as a broader symbol of corporate accountability in American manufacturing. Were corners cut? Were workers pressured to stay silent? Did Harley delay the recall to protect quarterly earnings? These questions weren't just hypothetical, they were now part of the public record. And they weren't the only ones demanding answers. Harley's own workers were next. Labor demands answers from within. Inside Harley's assembly plants, the mood was shifting. Workers who once wore the bar and shield with pride were now speaking in hushed tones about missed inspections, rushed production orders, and silence from upper management. Union representatives began organizing closed-door meetings. What started as concern over safety quickly evolved into broader questions about job security and corporate integrity. Many of the employees who build Harley's motorcycles take enormous pride in their craftsmanship. These are not just assembly line jobs. They're cultural contributions to a product riders see as an extension of identity. But after the bracket failure recall, some workers felt blindsided. Why weren't they informed earlier? Were the brackets flagged during production? Were defect rates quietly rising on the factory floor? According to internal memos leaked to local media, concerns about the rear suspension adjuster had been logged as far back as 2021, but without any formal escalation. One memo revealed that supervisors instructed line workers to push through minor bracket variances, a phrase that now carries a much heavier implication. In response, union leaders are calling for an independent safety audit of Harley's Wisconsin plant and demanding more transparent communication protocols for future component concerns. The fear isn't just about blame, it's about backlash. If Harley's brand continues to falter, what happens to the jobs? Will cost-cutting accelerate? Will new parts be outsourced? The recall may have started under the seat of a Softail, but it's now rippling across the livelihoods of the people who built them. Stay ahead of the curve and make sure you don't miss crucial updates. If you want to stay informed and keep your ride safe, subscribe to our channel. You don't want to be left behind when important recalls like this are happening. And for riders still holding on to hope, there's one last move left to make. What every Harley rider must do now. If you ride a Softail built between 2018 and 2024, the time to act is now. This isn't just about performance, it's about safety. A broken rear suspension bracket can cause the adjuster knob to rub against the rear tire. If that friction goes unnoticed, the tire could lose pressure, and on the road that can be deadly. First, check if your motorcycle is affected by using Harley-Davidson's official recall lookup tool. You'll need your vehicle identification number, found on the frame's down tube or registration paperwork. If your bike is listed, call your nearest authorized Harley-Davidson dealership and schedule a recall service. This repair is free of charge and absolutely essential. Second, even if your bike isn't on the recall list, inspect your rear tire and suspension adjuster. Look for any signs of rubber dust, grooves, or contact between the tire and the bracket. Listen for noise beneath the seat during rides. Anything unusual could be a warning. Third, report issues. If you've experienced abnormal wear, pressure drops, or unexplained tire damage, document everything. Photos, dates, mileage, all of it. Send a formal report to both your dealership and NHTSA. Your feedback may help expand the scope of the recall or catch other potential safety issues. Because if Harley won't protect the ride, you have to protect your life. Before you go, leave a like, comment your favorite bike, and make sure you watch dealerships are dumping motorcycles in these states. Here's where to look to find out where the biggest discounts are. This could be the opportunity you've been waiting for. Subscribe and stay tuned for more exclusive updates.